Hello, Coshocton, and welcome back to Now You're Talking with me, Jessie Marcinkiewicz. We've had a lot of great guests on so far on Now You're Talking, which airs live every Wednesday at 10 o'clock on www.coshoctontv.com, Coshocton's online TV station. So I have another great guest here for you guys this week. I have Vicki Laudick here with me. She is with First Step Family Violence here in Coshocton. And you could put a title on her as Relationship and Communication Advisor. And Vicki, can you tell me more about the services that you do at First Step?
Well, First Step, we are the organization here in Coshocton County that works with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault victims. But we also do a lot of prevention programs too in the schools, in the hope that someday that domestic violence will be one of the less crimes in Coshocton County instead of the one of the number one crimes. So we provide services such as shelter 24/7 for individuals who need a safe place. It's for right now women and children, and also pets, in which we are unique in the state of Ohio that we offer a safe place for pets, because that could be a barrier to victims leaving a violent home. So it's a temporary placement, but at least it's something that they know their pets are going to be safe and not hurt. We also have 24 hours, 7 days, 24 hours a day services through our helpline to reach out to individuals who may not come into our office and ask for services. Really, it was established for our upper income level people who probably will not come to see me at 604 Walnut Street. But they need to know what services, they need to know about safety plans, what are services out of the county that they may feel more comfortable with, how do they remain safe, what things do they need to do. We also have someone on call 24/7 because domestic violence, sexual assault does not happen 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. So we have someone who can go to the sheriff's department, to the hospital to meet with individuals to help them process what's just happened to them and to provide them with the support systems beyond the issue of that night. We also do individual services. Advocacy, support counseling is very important. As a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault, all the things that the individual has to deal with about themselves, the things that they need to put into place for their own safety, about changing the negative talk to positive talk. And when we talk about domestic violence, we don't just talk about the physical violence, but we talk about emotional violence. And that's very important that we look at that, because that's really where the physical violence starts. So we talk about self-esteem, self-value, self-respect. It's so important to have that. And for my generation, which is a long, long time ago, we didn't talk about those things. So it is kind of a new way of looking at how we deal with situations, and some issues we'll be talking about today really have to focus on self. So we have the individual services, we have group services, support services for victims of violence, again, domestic violence and sexual assault. We have our perpetrators program, men's group for individuals who have been convicted of domestic violence, and also women who resort to violence, which are women who have been also arrested for domestic violence. That's a 6-month program in which what our hope is that we re-educate. It's not counseling, it's not therapeutic, it's about this is what violence is, this is how to stop it. Because if we did not have the violence, we would not have the victims. So we have to focus on how do we stop that? And that's really what that program is about. Taking responsibility for your choices, not blaming others. That's so important, because it's real easy to say, well, she made me or he made me, but ultimately we make that choice to do whatever we do. And sometimes we do it out of what those consequences would be if we do not. Again, we're in the schools, we do a lot of prevention. We have Katie Stewart who does the healthy relationships about, this is what a healthy relationship is. We're talking about sexual harassment. We have self-defense courses. I mean, it's just a variety of prevention to ensure people that we're prepared. And when you think about the issue of sexual assault, especially with our young women going off to college, I mean, the last statistic, 1 out of 4 young women going to college will be sexually assaulted in some way in their 4 years of college. We need to be proactive in our community to support individuals and educate them of how to lower their risk, what do I need to be aware of so that I don't look like that target? You know, what are just some safety things, and where I park my car, if I'm walking to a class by myself, you know, what do I need to do? Where are the security system? Sometimes it's just that common sense type of things, but you don't think about it till you're in the middle of it. So not only is it how do I protect myself, but how, you know, physically, but also how do I think ahead so that I lessen that risk? And I think, again, that's very important that we're in the schools talking about that and talking about what are the red flags in relationships. Both, you know, I'm not talking about gender, male, female, we're just talking about relationships, individuals. What are these red flags that put me at risk of being a victim of violence, of dating violence, which we know is such a great issue right now in our community, and to the point we have a law that is fairly new, and that each school system is supposed to have a policy in place about dating violence, as well as bullying. So we know that the violence starts at a very young age, and we see it with the bullying in the elementary schools, and then we see that kind of change into the dating violence in the high school years. We also have a school advocate that works within our schools, to school districts, in which they're referred to the school advocate, teachers, principals, parents, sometimes teenagers say, I really just need to talk to somebody. And this is an individual who just listens. And anything from, we've had issues regarding suicide, we've had dating violence again, to hygiene issues, to broken pair of glasses, we need to find a new pair. I mean, it's kind of just putting all those issues together, and the advocate knows the resources within our community, they know how to refer, but it's also having this person who just listens, not telling them anything, telling them they're doing anything wrong, there's no consequences to it, it's just having someone they can interact with and just talk about whatever's going on in their life. Again, it can be very major issues, again, divorce, domestic violence, child abuse. Again, the bullying issue is such a major concern in our schools that we know all the schools are very proactive in creating programs to eliminate that or lessen that, if I can say that. So, but anyway, that's kind of the things that we do at First Step. We are a United Way agency. We are a nonprofit. We know that we would not be in our community here, be as successful as we are, if it wasn't for the community support. And I believe we really are a community agency. So that's what we do.
Well, Vicki, you mentioned some red flags in relationships, and that was the main reason why I wanted to get Vicki Laudick on here. Sometimes we ask our friends for relationship advice, and let's face it, our friends normally don't give the best advice. And so I wanted to get an expert on here, an advisor on here on CoshoctonTV.com to give the viewers a chance to submit questions that you would like answered by Vicki. They are anonymous and confidential. And I do have some questions that were sent to me from the viewers. I put a Facebook status on, and so thank you for everybody who responded. And Vicki, you mentioned, let's start off with red flags. What are some red flags in a relationship?
If I could kind of go back.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, when we look at relationships, we have to focus on ourselves. You know, a lot of times we're always looking at the other person. And one thing we have to realize is we can't change anybody. The only person that we can change is ourselves. So we really have to know who we are, what our boundaries are, what we're comfortable with, what we're not uncomfortable with. And in saying that and setting boundaries, what are we going to do when someone steps all over our boundaries? And that's going to happen. You know, I've always said I'm great at setting boundaries. And then someone steps on them, I'm like, oh my gosh, now what am I going to do? So it's kind of like this plan of knowing about, again, ourselves. What am I uncomfortable with? What do I need to do? Like with the red flags. How many red flags do I see before I go, okay, this relationship isn't a good thing, okay?
Right.
And your red flags and mine may be different,
Right.
okay? So it's looking again and really getting to know ourselves. And that's probably the number one thing that I'd like to say in all of our conversations is that I have to look at this other person going, I can't change them. How am I going to respond, not react, respond to them differently? And how do I communicate that to them? And how do I talk with them, not at them or to them, so that we have this discussion? And if the other person is not there, that's real hard to do that. But that's a red flag, okay? If one of the red flags would be, if I'm saying to someone, you know, I'm real uncomfortable with this. Let's say, for instance, I don't like jokes that are degrading to people, you know, gender, race. I just don't like them. I don't want to hear them. So if I say to you, you know, Jesse, I don't want to hear those jokes. I just don't like them, okay? I'm uncomfortable hearing them. And if you're respectful to me, then what?
I won't do it.
You won't do it.
Right.
But then if we're out in a group and you telling the jokes in front of me, you know, I'm not telling you not to. That's cool. That's up to you. It's your choice. But for my choice, I don't want to hear it. So if I've told you that and then you do it anyway, and especially in a group, then I had to figure out how I'm going to handle that, because you just disregarded what I said. Now, I had the option of saying later, I felt very disrespected with that, or I have the choices to tell the joke, I leave. You know, I take myself out of that, because then I'm giving you the message of what? I'm not going to put up with it.
Right, you cross the boundary.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a consequence to crossing the boundary. So those are some things, you know, that when you have communicated this, and you've done it pretty straightforward, you know, no questions about it, very direct, but respectful, you know, and you're not being heard, then that is a major red flag, because that means you're not going to be heard about other things, okay? About the violence. You know, about being disrespected, about the emotional abuse. You're not going to be heard. You know, things like, you know, I give this example too. A red flag would be, okay, you say to me, where do you want to go to dinner? And I said, oh, I really don't care. Wherever you want to go. No, where do you want to go? Okay, well, I want to go to this place, I'll say. But, and you say to me, oh, you want to go to that place? You know, they're too expensive and the food's terrible there. So then it's like you put me out there and said, you gave me some power to make a decision, and then you took it away from me.
Right.
And then what happens, I just kind of go, okay, wherever. Do you see what I'm saying? It's kind of that indirect controlling that goes on. And those, again, are those, you put these together, they're red flags. Certainly, name calling, wondering where have you been? You went to the grocery store? Should have taken you a half hour. It's 45 minutes later. Where were you the last 15 minutes? A lot of, if you're accused of affairs or any, you know, things like that, there's no validation.
Lack of trust.
Lack
of trust is a big one.
Yes. So those are some things. Red flags again would be, again, questioning you, checking your car, you know, how many miles did you go, listening to phone calls, setting up so that, you know, if a friend comes over, it's kind of like you're walking on eggshells so the friend doesn't want to come back. That extends to family as well. You know, telling a person this is your role, this is what you need to do. Women do this, men do that, okay? So those are just some of the red flags. I think that the greatest thing for any of us to think about is that red flag whenever you get that sick feeling, like you want to throw up kind of, you know, that heebie-jeebie feeling, as I said. If that's happening, paying attention to that, because you're uncomfortable with this.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get to some of the questions that people submitted. And Vicki, one of them is, how do I handle a mother-in-law who is overstepping her bounds and has been warned before about her overbearing behavior?
Wow, that's a good one. What I would say, first of all, is that discussion with the child of your
husband
partner,
or
spouse, or that discussing it with them and setting the boundaries together. Having that discussion then either together with the mother-in-law or that her child does that. You know, this is the boundaries, Mom. Again, you're not going to change this person. So it's also then taking another step. I set this boundary, she's overbearing, and then you have to define what overbearing is. Okay, you have to be very specific, because again, what you may see as overbearing, she's not going to see as that. So it's very defined. What exactly are you talking about? Being real specific, and then, you know, this is what we're uncomfortable with, and this is what we like to see happen. If that's not heard, then it's like, how are you going to respond to her? And again, it's like how, you know, having the plan that if she does continue this, what are you going to do? And again, it's hard to say just do 1, 2, 3, and 4. But it's that discussion, and it's talking what you're both comfortable with, you know, what can you do, and just having the communication. But if you get upset, you start the yelling, you know, calling names, making it explode, it's not going to resolve anything. at that point you're just trying to hurt each other or control the situation.
Right.
Does that sound good?
Yeah. Are there any proven steps you can share for getting over a breakup?
Time and learning about yourself. I think what happens on a breakup, whether it's there has been violence in it or it's just not compatible, it takes a time to get to know you and how you are dealing with it yourself. Because what happens is when we have a breakup, we start doing the doubting thing, you know, putting ourselves down, questioning our abilities in a relationship. Or we may look at all the negative stuff that the other person, you know, well, I'm, you know, just kind of like, well, he was or she was a terrible person and that's better. It's really, we have to just stop and, okay, what is this about? What can I look at to look at red flags, as we talked about, and what did this do to me? And, you know, some people say there's a period of time that you should not get back in a relationship. I don't say that. I think it's up to the individual. For some people, it can be a few months. For some people, it can be years.
And that was another question we had, as you know, how long do you wait before you get into another relationship? I also want to ask too, at what point when dating someone new, is it okay to discuss past relationships, if at all?
You know, that's when it becomes the focus of the relationship. Every time you're together, you're talking about this relationship and what went bad, and I'm going to say it's probably a negative there. And I think, again, I don't like saying there is a specific amount of time. You know, when you have that comfort zone. But again, when it becomes the focus of your relationship, that's a negative. I mean, you're not talking about your relationship. And they haven't grieved their loss of this relationship, or they wouldn't be talking about it all the time. So I think you have to kind of step back and look at that. I don't know, the relationship needs to end, but, you know, kind of like, well, maybe referring the other person to a friend or to First Step or some place that they can talk about it freely. Because how can you be totally objective with this person? You know, it's either going to be, oh my gosh, you know, that person was terrible to you, and, you know, kind of get on that bandwagon, or you kind of sit back and go, well, you know, what was going on in that relationship, and I don't want to, you know, you start comparing to yours. So I'd say referring to someone else to really talk to about that.
Okay, here's a good one.
Okay.
I have two more questions before we wrap up. Now you're talking, but this person sent this message. I seem to be only attracted to one specific type of guy, the bad ones. Is there any science behind that? And is there any way to break that cycle? Which is true, you know, women tend to be attracted to the bad guys, the rebels.
I don't know if there's any science back or whatever. I think that find out what is the attraction. And usually it goes kind of back to yourself. What is it that you set yourself up to be hurt? It comes back to, I'm not feeling confident, or I don't feel good about myself, or I don't know what a good relationship is. You know, really we have to look, we go back to our childhood, which I don't blame childhood on things, but we learn things then, right? We learn about relationships. So if your parents or the significant people in your life were always at each other and were kind of like that bad guy, and that's, you know, that's what you know, that's what you're used to. So of course you're going to be attracted to those individuals. So that's what I would say about that. But I think that, you know, I hear that a lot, you know, why am I attracted to the same person? But again, instead of going from one relationship right into another, it's stopping and saying, what happened here? And what about me? Not about this other person. Well, what do I need to do? And what do I need to look at differently?
It's all about finding yourself.
It is.
And knowing what you want and what you don't want.
Exactly.
And what you don't want is okay.
Exactly.
It is
you
okay.
have that right to make those choices.
Now, our last question is, internet dating has become such a big thing, people using Match.com or meeting people on Facebook, things like that. Is there really a thing as love at first sight? Is it possible to love someone who you've talked to every day for 2 months, but only seen each other twice? And if you connect with this person, is that like a recipe for longevity towards marriage? That was another question that was asked.
Love at first sight. I mean, we hear about it. I don't know that I think that really occurs. I think that we have to first define what love is. And there's the two of us here and there's other people in this room. My guess is that we all ask someone what that means. We're going to have different definitions. So I guess that's where we have to come from first. But it's knowing the person. It's getting to know who they are. How can you do that? By just over the internet or talking to them on the phone or meeting them a couple times. It's knowing the positives about them, but also the things that you're kind of not okay with. It's about the communication. How can I talk with you, if I'm not being heard? And it's one thing, we know when you're dating, it's honeymoon time, right?
Right.
Everything's perfect, you're on your best behavior, if I can say that. You want you want the other person to like you and really see the good things about you. That's not real, because there's going to be things that happen. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be, all these barriers that we know in relationships. Because as I was talking to someone earlier, you're talking about combining two different ways of looking at things into one. And if we don't see it the same way, then how are you going to deal with that? So I don't think that happens. I'm sure there's people out there that will disagree with me, and that's okay, because again, we all, you could have 3 other people like myself sitting here and we'd answer those differently. But I'd say love at first sight. I'd kind of sit back a little bit and look at it a little bit longer. So. Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, this is Vicki Laudick. She is a relationship and communication advisor at First Step Family Violence here in Coshocton. And she is going to be on the 3rd Wednesday of every month here on CoshoctonTV.com. So if you have any questions you would like to ask her about relationships or life or about any certain situations, please email me at Jessie, Jessi, at CoshoctonTV.com. That's my time here for Now You're Talking. I'm Jessie Marcinkavich, and you're watching Coshocton's online TV station.